So now let's get to the competition. The moot for this competition is the immediate acceleration of the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline. I repeat, the immediate acceleration of the SDGs is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline. So we have one side as proposition who will be supporting this moot, and the other side, the opposition, will be opposing. So we would like to introduce our proposition team, and when I introduce your name, could you just please stand? For the proposition, we have leader Shyne Savory from the Creative Performing Arts Group. For seconder, we have Deryn Leslie from the Cape Pure Sciences. And for the rebuttal, we have Cameron Gustave from the Cape Pure Science. Now for the opposition, we have leader Sharm Peter, Cape Humanities. Seconder, we have Dasha Jules, Cape Humanities. And lastly, we have the rebuttal, Faith Regis, Cape Humanities. Very sorry. And now for our esteemed judges. And if you could just wave so the crowd knows who you are. Shima Herald has been a lecturer at the Safa Lewis Community College for over 10 years. Originally from Europe, she earned a law degree in the UK, after which she worked in London at one of the main corporate law firms for several years. Happy to give up the fast pace of the corporate world, she moved with her family to St. Lucia in 2006. She now specializes in business and hospitality law. She's passionate about helping students reach their full potential. Her favorite quote is, "No matter how you feel, get up, dress up, show up, and never give up." In her spare time, she likes to read and follow politics and current affairs. She has occasionally served as an advisor to the SALCC's debating team. Thank you. Can you give a round of applause? Our second judge, Dwight Lewis. Dwight Lewis has decades of experience in the finance sector. His career journey includes stints with financial institutions, including the Barclays Bank, Ministry of Finance as a budget analyst, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank as a senior bank examiner, Bank of Antigua as a senior assistant manager, and Advanced Caribbean Limited in Antigua as managing director, to name a few. He is now retired and focuses his talents on farming. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Leela Ramjwan, who is a seasoned program policy officer with a wealth of experience spanning over 18 years in government and non-profit organizations. Her professional journey has been marked by an unwavering commitment to drive positive change and fostering sustainable development. Lilia's expertise encompasses various areas, including project coordination, stakeholder engagement, international development, policy advocacy, diplomacy, and knowledge management. Currently serving as the Program Policy Officer at the World Food Programme in the St. Lucia office, Lilia is responsible for directing and coordinating the functions to support WFP's mission. She actively collaborates with government entities, partners, and stakeholders to advance their development goals. Prior to her current role, Lilia served as a joint program coordinator for the Joint SDG Fund on Universal Adaptive Social Protection in the Eastern Caribbean. During her tenure, she led coordination of a complex, multi-stakeholder program with significant regional impact, working closely with 5 UN agencies, 2 countries, and a regional organization. Her leadership and expertise have played a pivotal role in the success of the initiatives she's been involved in. With a strong academic foundation, extensive professional experience, and a passion for fostering sustainable development, Lilia is a dedicated professional who has made a significant impact across various sectors. So now I will just briefly go through the procedures for the debate. The leader of the proposition will make his case for a maximum of 10 minutes, and then the leader of the opposition will do the same. The seconder of the proposition shall then make their case for 7 minutes, and the seconder for the opposition shall do the same. There will be a break in this time for both sides to prepare for a rebuttal, and then the rebuttal shall be, sorry, just give me a moment, a maximum of 5 minutes for each side. There will be a timekeeper. Can our timekeeper just wave? So, yes. So, debaters, pay attention to your timekeeper. He will indicate when 1 minute is left. He will indicate by a placard, and at the end of each speaker's allocated time, the speaker will vacate the lectern. So please keep track of your time. And after all the debating is done, we will give the judges some time to deliberate, and in that time we may have an open forum where persons can discuss the moot. Not the debaters or what they presented, but the moot itself. So I would like to invite our first speaker from the proposition, Leader Sharm Peter. Sharm Peter. Savory. Oh, sorry, I was given bad notes. Shyne Savory, please come up.
Honorable judges, moderator, opponents, and dear audience, good morning. The whistle has been blown. It's halftime. It's 2023, and we are halfway to our deadline of 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals. Some background. In 2015, the 196 nations of the world met at the UN to establish, quote, a radical, ambitious commitment to a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. And thus the SDGs were born. 17 well-outlined categories for change, ranging from basic human needs to optimal living conditions to environmentalism. And all countries agreed to a time limit of 15 years to achieve those goals. And 2030 will be the year that we see our work come into fruition. 2023, halftime. Our players are on the field. They're all in a circle discussing what's next. Our coaches are looking to see how we can do better what we've done so far. And in the stands, we have naysayers. A riot is about to break out from people who say that this win is not possible. But we, the proposition, can confidently assert that the immediate acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline. Now, let's lay out the ground rules of the game. We will define immediate as meaning nearest in time, that is currently in 2023. To also take from the Oxford Dictionary, acceleration means capacity to gain speed within a short period of time, and sufficient is defined as enough or adequate. To restate, we will convince you, moderator, that the actions taken up to this point in 2023 can reach the momentum needed to achieve an adequate proportion of the Sustainable Development Goals. The proposition will assert our position that the successes of the UN's previous Millennium Development Goals are an excellent indicator of the SDGs' chances of success. Secondly, we will highlight the current status of the SDGs to illustrate that the quality and depth of our achievements thus ensure the future progress of the goals. And finally, we seek to illuminate you on the potential that is currently building up that will boost us over the finish line. Now, to get this out of the way, it is very easy for the uninformed to say that these goals are simply unrealistic. Let's take a look at some of them. 1.1, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere. 2.3, double the agricultural productivity of small-scale farmers. And 7.3, double the rate of global improvement in energy efficiency. These are indeed massive goals. Some may say impossible. However, a fundamental thing to understand is that the UN did not set out these ambitions blindly. The Sustainable Development Goals did not materialize from nothing in 2015. In fact, the SDGs are an updated continuation of the Millennium Development Goals in 2000, where 8 categories, similar to the ones that we have today, were laid out. And by the time 2015 had arrived, here is what they had achieved. Extreme poverty rates were halved 5 years ahead of the deadline. The proportion of people without access to water services halved 5 years ahead of the deadline. New HIV infections fell approximately 40%. Official development assistance from developed countries increased by 66% in real terms. And in 1990, since 1990, the maternal mortality rate had been cut in half. And most of that reduction had occurred since the adoption of the MDGs in 2000. All of that in 15 years. So to those who say that these goals were unrealistic to begin with, I beg to differ. The UN Secretary General MDG Advocacy Group called it the most successful global anti-poverty push in history. And these are the shoulders that the SDGs are standing on. And from this initiative, we have grown. The MDGs were measured 8 goals, 60 indicators. By 2015, that had grown to 17 goals with 115 indicators. And we're not done. In 2023, with 17 goals, we have 225 indicators used to track progress. So, moderator, here in 2023, we have a far greater amount of information, a far better blueprint to base our progress off of than we did in a world without the advantages that we have now in 2000. Therefore, we are poised to make significant strides once again. So let us return for a second, moderator, to the definition of the word sufficient, enough or adequate. Now, this is a subjective measurement, but as a guideline, let's use a metric that we are all familiar with. School. I don't know of any schools that say that you must get 100% in every single subject for you to be considered a sufficient student. Let's use the metric of 50% or 60%. So to be generous, using that baseline, we need to set out to achieve half of what was outlined in the goals for our efforts to be considered sufficient. And the 2023 SDG Index showed that global achievement of the SDGs is currently at 67%. Most countries where data permits are given an SDG score between 0 and 100, and currently out of 166 countries, 96% scored over 50 and 81% scored over 60. By both of our metrics, that is not a failing grade. Moderator, those statistics can be tempting as the be-all, end-all of assessing whether our effort has been effective. It is also worth looking not just at the breadth and the spread of our progress, but the depth and the quality of the work that we have done so far. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are integrated, meaning that progress in one area can positively affect others. And a look at the 2023 SDG report shows that out of all of the goals, the current upwards improvements are in affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and responsible consumption and production, among others. The report continues to state that in 2021, developing countries reached new records of renewable energy generating capacity. The increased deployment of clean energy technologies and reduced industrial production prevented additional emissions, resulting in lower than expected emissions growth. The benefits of these types of goals in particular far reach beyond the countries or regions where they are employed. These types of innovations that keep carbon out of the air that we all breathe, that prevent disasters that affect countries throughout the world, and that keep our food growing and our land safe, have an extensive effect on the 17 goals. Our acceleration is dependent more than anything else on the progress in the goals in these areas. And on the matter of one positive change affecting another, the UN spillover rankings measure countries' abilities to do precisely that. The spillover score measures countries' positive effects on others, meaning that a higher score indicates a country's potential to have a positive effects on the countries in the region and less negative effects. The first 60 highest placing countries, all with a score of 96 or higher, were developing countries, which says, moderator, that even in developing countries where progress may at first be slower or unpromising, the work that we do there has the capacity to increase exponentially, expanding far beyond the borders that we had originally intended. So this means, moderator, that we can argue that the acceleration, the ability to build up speed is increasing, even though it may be slow at first, and that the rewards reaped will multiply. Now, the elephant in the room, COVID-19, wars. It is true. We can't predict everything. There are negative effects in this world that will set us back and undo our progress. But moderator, I ask you this. Are all surprises negative? No. Who's to say that there can't be great surprises that are coming our way that will boost us forward that we couldn't have planned for? Let's look at the Caribbean region, our sister Guyana. Who would have expected that they would have made the oil discoveries that they did? According to the BBC, come 2025, it is expected that Guyana's GDP could go up 300 to 1,000%, becoming possibly the richest country in the hemisphere and even potentially in the world. Surprises do not always have to be negative. There are progresses that have yet to be made that can boost us forward beyond what we could have imagined. There is an increased effort beyond just financing. The people who are putting these goals together, the people who are being impacted by SDG events exactly like this ones, are the ones who will be furthering progress by telling others, by multiplying how they move. So, the UN themselves have admitted that achieving every target by 2030 is indeed unrealistic. And that wasn't the target for the Millennium Goals either, and it's why we're still here working to build on what has already been achieved. But moderator, I hope that we have been able to convince you that even at this current pace, we are able to accelerate, we are able to increase our speed to reach those 2030 goals. So in conclusion, the ball is in the court. 2030, here we come.
Okay, so now we invite the leader of the opposition, Mr. Sharm Peter.
Moderator, judges, my worthy opponents, esteemed guests, good morning. The Sustainable Development Goals are a consistently recurring benchmark set out by the United Nations to express their intended progress at a given deadline to ensure the continued sustainability and development of the world's nations. To quote the World Health Organization, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, aim to transform our world. They are called to action to end poverty and inequality, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy health, justice, and prosperity. The initiative is a positive constant in the world and innately altruistic in its intent. However, it does have a tendency to be somewhat overambitious with respect to the predicted timeline to attain these goals. We of the opposition contend that particularly even with an immediate acceleration of the current SDGs, it would be insufficient to meet the 2030 deadline, unlike what our learned contemporaries may purport. In support of our stance, we have three main points to present. First, the frankly unrealistic goals to be achieved within the remaining timeline. Secondly, the former failed acceleration initiative of 2019. And thirdly, the increasingly individualistic nature of many of the United Nations countries. Before we begin our discussion, however, I believe we should define some of the terminology in the moot. To firstly define the term immediate acceleration, in this particular context, immediate acceleration is meant to denote a vastly increased rate of progress towards the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Additionally, another important piece of terminology we must define in this discussion is the term sufficient, which in this context means enough to satisfy all the goals considerably as of the year 2030. Now, to open with our first point, some of the SDGs inherently exist in a more idealistic state than others. Their attainability, even from the onset nearly a decade ago, seemed questionable. SDGs such as the first, no poverty, and second, zero hunger, even the 16th, peace, justice, and strong institutions, at the time of the commencement of the initiative in 2015, as well as of the inaugural report of 2016, were largely unattainable. Many of these still remain largely unachievable for a significant percentage of the global populace, and even if progress is being made in the most fantastical of goals, that progress is largely domesticated within an already economically advanced nations. The elimination of a percentage of the lower class of thriving countries has proven more attainable than the removal of systems in countries that are rendered lower class in their entirety. For example, the United States of America managed to bring their rate of poverty down from 12.7% in 2016 to 11.6% as of 2022. A significant drop in those 7 years, especially when considering that less than half of these people existed in extreme poverty. However, based on economic reviews as of the 3rd of September 2023, the United States of America stands as the current richest nation in the world with a standing GDP of $26,854 billion. For such a financially thriving nation, the class of poverty becomes a lot more divisive, and what was once a commendable state of progress, when viewed with the fact that this is the progress of the richest country in the world, the 1.1% drop in 7 years becomes far less impressive. And to confound the point, we can compare this rate of poverty decline with corroborated reports from some of the lowest income countries in the world to see if their poverty has largely declined by comparison. The African nation of Chad, which stood at 45% poverty in 2016, now has actually risen to 47.4% poverty. Amongst them, 38.7% exist in extreme poverty. The nation of Benin has fluctuated within the range of 37 to 40% poverty for 7 years. Uganda in 2016 was at 41.7% extreme poverty, and 7 years later, which is just 7 years before these goals are supposed to be achieved, they sit at a poverty rate of 40%. These SDGs are not nation-specific. Should larger economies progress and achieve their goals, that does little to the global intent of the mission, especially given the fact that these larger nations are not looking to be in a comfortable position to complete these goals either. Due to the economic disparity of so many nations of the world, many of the SDGs, even with the implementation of an immediate acceleration, are frankly highly unlikely to be attained by the year 2030. Our second point. The progress towards the 17 goals has been moderate and gradual since the inaugural 2016 report, even to the most recent 2023 report. Now, moderate and gradual progress would be well and good were it not for the deadline to be projected at 2030. As it stands, there's no promising indication that these 7 years of progress have been substantial to the resources allocated towards the mission in this period. Similar sentiments were shared 4 years ago, as following the 2019 SDG Summit, it was declared by the UN that there was, quote, an urgent need for concerted, accelerated action by all stakeholders at all levels to accelerate the 2030 agenda, close quote. However, 4 years later, it seems this call was itself insufficient, and now, far closer to the 2030 deadline, yet again we see this urgent need arise. And this time, it isn't merely a call for stakeholder investment, but we see, based on the press release of the 2023 UN SDG Summit, released on the 19th of September this year, quote, at the midpoint of SDG implementation, the SDGs are in peril. Tens of millions have fallen into poverty since 2020. Over 110 million people are forcibly displaced. Inequalities have worsened, strikingly so for women and girls. Many governments are forced to choose between debt payments and investing in healthcare and education. The climate emergency is wreaking havoc on lives and livelihoods. Developing countries and the world's most vulnerable people continue to bear the brunt of these crises, end quote. So even after an initial acceleration 4 years ago, we are in still dire need for another? With less time and with more matters to allocate resources towards, such as continuing recovery from natural disasters, as well as recovering economies from the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most economically crippling global events of the past 2 decades, an immediate acceleration is no more likely to result in success than it did 4 years ago, when we had more time and less matters to use it on. My third and last point. All of this business of an immediate acceleration is not just a matter of necessity. There must be lip service given to the notion by the UN as it deflects from a larger problem at the core of the scheme. As was mentioned before, the SDGs are not only isolated to one nation or just a region, it's a global initiative. Therefore, it's much easier to simply say there must be immediate acceleration than it is to address why many lower income economies are incapable of making this acceleration. When I now speak of the individualistic nature of nations, it's not in contempt of these nations. They must consort their individual problems before they can contribute to the global stage. It's only natural. However, no victory can be achieved for the SDGs whilst many of these impoverished or otherwise incapable nations stand struggling. It is by its very nature an all-for-one, one-for-all initiative. Notable examples of this are the many war-torn countries of the African continent. According to the 2020 report from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, quote, there were at least 15 countries with active armed conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019, close quote, in nations such as Cameroon, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mozambique, Sudan, and more. The Geneva Academy has released statistics indicating that Western powers and/or countries have provided assistance in less than 10 of these conflicts. And according to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, as of 2022, quote, nearly 40% of all Africans are still living in extreme poverty. There's also been a decline in democratic values, challenges in holding free and fair elections, and unconstitutional changes of government. Africa underperforms on the rule of law, with even essential governing functions, such as civil registration systems, falling short, close quote. But these matters of internal strife are not limited to economic circumstances. For instance, India, the current 6th richest country in the world, is fairly unlikely to complete Goal 11, in particular by 2030, that being sustainable cities and communities. The data to support this assertion was carried out by Kavita T, the Strategic Alliance Manager of the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. And as the population continues to grow, India is set to find more difficulty in achieving this goal. In conclusion, as we've succinctly presented today, based on the frankly unrealistic goals of President of the failed Acceleration Initiative in 2019 and the necessary increasingly individualistic nature of countries of the United Nations, this current immediate acceleration of the SDGs will be insufficient to meet the 2030 deadline. I thank you.
Okay, so we will now have the seconder for the proposition, Deryn Leslie.
Moderator, esteemed judges, fellow opponents, colleagues, and members of the audience, I bid you a pleasant morning. As my colleague stated, we the proposition affirm the moot, the immediate acceleration of the SDGs is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline. It is not too late. This is a decade of action. I will support this claim by focusing on one main point. The best practices implemented in the 2019 resolution will make a significant difference to the SDGs proposed in 2015. The opposition may argue that it is too late to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals set in 2015. But world leaders of the UN countries collaborated at the SDG Summit in 2019 and raised ambition and transformative action that can be taken to ensure the targets set in 2015 are met. They called for a decade of action and delivery for sustainable development and pledged to mobilize financing, enhance national implementation, and strengthen institutions to achieve the goals by the target date of 2030, leaving no one behind. The UN Secretary General, Lee Junhua, stated, "The task ahead is daunting, but not impossible." According to www.un.org, the UN Secretary General called on all sectors of society to mobilize for a decade of action on 3 levels: global action to secure greater leadership, more resources, and smarter solutions for the SDGs. Local action embedding the needed transition in the policies, budgets, institutions, and regulatory framework of governments, cities and local authorities, and people action, including by youth, civil society, the media, the private sector, unions, academia, and other stakeholders, to generate an unstoppable movement pushing for the required transformations. You see, moderator, from 2015 to 2019, underdeveloped countries did not have the funds to achieve the goals. People were not convinced to implement the goals, and the effort needed to push the goals wasn't present. However, now that developing countries started to see problems with climate change, health issues, wars such as the Ukraine-Russian war, and COVID-19 pandemic, they will be more willing to make a change. Now, the push to implement the SDGs is present not only in the developing countries, but in all countries. The resolution in 2019 shows that developing countries are starting to recognize what they have not recognized before, that there is a dire need to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. Financial aid and expertise is being supplied to underdeveloped countries. The emphasis now is significantly greater than before. Why do we, the proposition, believe that in this decade, significantly more progress can be made by the UN towards achieving the 2030 agenda? The UN have had a chance to see what inaction between 2015 and 2019 can lead to, and on the 15th of October 2019, the UN did openly commit to the following: implementing the 2030 agenda as a plan of action for people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Pledge to make the coming decade one of action and delivery. Take more tangible steps to support people in vulnerable situations and the most vulnerable countries, and to reach the furthest behind first. Take action to end poverty and hunger everywhere. Combat inequalities within and among countries. Build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. To respect, protect, and fulfill human rights, and achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, and address issues of climate change. These points were not stressed in the 2015 resolution, but since 2019, the UN has made noticeable progress towards them. You may ask the question, what do the UN intend to do now, in the next 7 years, that they have not been doing since 2015? Well, unlike in 2015, the UN have committed for the next decade to leave no one behind. The UN will place a focus on the poorest and most vulnerable in society. This is a major improvement to the resolution of 2015, where consideration for the lesser able nations of the planet was weak and given little to no attention. Next, the UN will mobilize adequate and well-directed financing to close the financial gap. This is a new pledge that can significantly support developing nations to reach their own development goals. Thirdly, the UN will promote research, capacity building initiatives, innovation, and technologies towards advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, and promote the use of scientific evidence from all fields to enable the transformation to sustainable development. Through science, we are finding more solutions to problems, and if more emphasis is placed on research, chances are we will find more solutions in the next 7 years. The SDG report 2023 shows that the UN is not all talk, and that we have seen progress towards some of the goals. A significant reduction in child mortality has been achieved over the past 2 decades, between 2015 and 2021. The global under 5 mortality rate fell by 12% from 43 deaths per 1,000 live births to 38. Additionally, the global neonatal mortality rate fell by about 10%, from 20 deaths per 1,000 live births to 18. Between 2015 and 2022, the proportion of the world's population with access to safely managed drinking water services increased from 69 to 73%. Safely managed sanitation services increased from 49 to 57%, and basic hygiene services increased from 67 to 75%. The global electricity access rate increased from 87% in 2015 to 91% in 2021, serving close to an additional 800 million people. I conclude by saying that the 2015 roadmap was a great first start, but made certain assumptions that did not materialize or not to the extent expected. In 2019, the 2019 call to action is a direct response by the UN to the failing performance of the world globally. Several of the developed nations have made strides in many of the SDGs, but they now realize that failure by developing nations mean a global calamity. Thank you very much.
So now we invite the seconder from the opposition, Mr. Dasha Jules.
Right. Moderator, judges, my comrades, fellow opponents, and members of the audience, I bid you a fair good morning. The proposition's frivolous and overzealous assertion that the immediate acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline overestimates the capacity of developing countries and lesser developed countries such as those of the Caribbean. Due to high levels of underdevelopment in many regions around the world, an immediate acceleration which pursues these SDGs is insufficient for development of the Caribbean region and will only lead to a foundationless structure destined to fail. Achieving the SDGs in the Caribbean by 2030 is simply not possible without the crippling effects of an unsteady foundation. I will support my comrade in consideration of the fact that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are not applicable to the underdeveloped countries, nor do they adequately account for the unforeseen global events that can disrupt progress, such as pandemics and wars. The extreme negation and exclusion of the developing countries, such as those of the Caribbean, is undermined by the proposition's unrealistic assertions that any form of acceleration to achieve these UN's SDGs will have a positive impact on a developing nation's people. The United Nations does not take into account our region. It is focused on larger countries with a higher capacity to engender development, not to mention the lack of statistics available to discover issues in state. Each country in the world has its own set of socioeconomic circumstances, environmental vulnerabilities, and political structures, making a one-size-fits-all approach wholly ineffective. Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals requires tailored strategies that account for differences and complexities. An example of uncertainty that wars create globally is in the impact of the war between Russia and Ukraine. This war could push Africa into serious debt distress, making countries less likely to meet their debt obligations, increasing inequality because food and fuel prices affect vulnerable households the hardest. Africa's gas producers, like Algeria, Libya, and Nigeria, are well positioned to supply the demand for fuel due to the Russian-Ukrainian war. However, it may subvert environmentally friendly energy distribution and restrict the continent's access to natural gas as they export it. Uncertainty makes the prediction of SDG achievement less likely and can hamper progress already completed. During the COVID-19 pandemic, St. Lucia's economy, dependent on tourism, was crippled. Additionally, due to the Russian-Ukrainian war, massive inflation in the prices of fuel and food continues to damage fragile economies. Not only was the country set back financially in terms of revenue, but also a high number of imports for hospital equipment, masks, and oxygen tanks landed us in further debt. As declared by the World Health Organization on 11th March 2020, the global pandemic is unmatched in terms of financial investment. According to Eaton in 2018, the civil war has devastated Libya's economy. The near total collapse of the state and the fragmentation of authority that followed the 2011 revolution allowed the emergence of a war economy based on violence and predation. The economic contraction led to the devaluation of the Libyan currency, according to the World Bank. The dire economic situation has in turn affected social conditions and public service provision. Geopolitical conflicts and persistent economic uncertainty are darkening sustainable development prospects in the Palestinian region. In an ensuing debate, the observer for the Palestine state warned that Israel's recent declaration of war on Palestine and the Palestinian civil population was exacerbated by its decision to seize water, fuel, and electricity from the Palestinian population, elevating an already dangerous situation into a humanitarian, sanitation, and environmental catastrophe. Progress towards quality education was already slower than required before the pandemic, but COVID-19 has had devastating impacts on education, causing learning losses in 4 of the 5 of the 104 countries studied. Despite the aspiration of universal secondary education completion, only 1 in 6 countries aims to achieve this goal by 2030 based on national targets. Approximately 300 million students will lack basic numeracy and literacy skills, even if these targets are met. An estimated 84 million children and young people will still be out of school by 2030. One of the core challenges in achieving these SDGs is the substantial economic inequality that exists in regions around the world. Prevalent in many developing states is a small elite controlling a significant portion of the wealth. Immediate acceleration may further exacerbate these inequalities, as it often prioritizes economic growth without the consideration of the distribution of its benefits. The overarching aim, leave no one behind, is threatened by the current growing inequalities. While the multiplied global challenges, economic and financial shocks associated with the Russian-Ukrainian war and COVID make financing for sustainability even more difficult. To conclude, the claim that the immediate acceleration of the SDGs is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline oversimplifies the complex challenges and diverse realities of the underdeveloped regions. Achieving SDGs requires a comprehensive, tailored, and content-specific approach that takes into account economic inequality, environmental stabilities, social and political barriers, and the unique challenges faced by each nation. To effectively address sustainable development goals, a balanced and holistic strategy that considers the long-term well-being of the region is essential. I thank you.
In 2015, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all United Nations member states. The 2030 Agenda is an urgent call for all governments to act now to end poverty, act now to ensure that education, housing, food, and other basic needs are available to all citizens through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. While all the Sustainable Development Goals are equally important, we focus on the 8 that St. Lucia needs to make more progress.
Poverty is not a lack of income. It's a lack of education, food, shelter, safety, dignity, health, inclusion.
No one should go hungry ever.
Healthcare is for everyone.
Clean water is a human right.
Celebrate diversity and discrimination.
Hurry up, save our planet.
Life above water depends on life below it. Save our oceans. Stop the violence.
Have you played your part? Act now so I can have a better future.
This message is sponsored by Marcy Stores St. Lucia Limited in collaboration with the United Nations Barbados and Eastern Caribbean Multi-Country Office.
In 2015, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all United Nations member states. The 2030 Agenda is an urgent call for all governments to act now to end poverty, act now to ensure that education, housing, food, and other basic needs are available to all citizens through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. While all the Sustainable Development Goals are equally important, we focus on the 8 that St. Lucia needs to make more progress.
Poverty is not a lack of income. It's a lack of education, food, shelter, safety, dignity, health, inclusion.
No one should go hungry ever.
Healthcare is for everyone.
Clean water is a human right.
Celebrate diversity and discrimination.
Hurry up, save our planet.
Life above water depends on life below it. Save our oceans. Stop the violence.
Have you played your part? Act now so I can have a better future.
This message is sponsored by Marcy Stores St. Lucia Limited in collaboration with the United Nations Barbados and Eastern Caribbean Multi-Country Office.
We are back. The 5 minutes have terminated. So, just a reminder that we are in the rebuttal phase, and each side will have 5 minutes to give their rebuttal. The judges will be looking for team coordination, general analysis of debate, recall of points, ability to refute the points, and spontaneity. So now we begin with the opposition, and we invite Ms. Faith Regis to come forward.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm here not merely to refute, but to plant a seed of thought into your minds. Consider this. Don't these goals sound a bit optimistic? The proposition purports that the success of the Sustainable Development Goals in the previous millennia speaks to the feasibility of these. But what the data shows, according to my colleagues' comprehensive research, is in direct contrast to this. Firstly, the likening of the global situation to a ballgame exposes the trivial and factitious attitude of the proposition to the moot. The proposition has refused to confront the recession experienced in the past 8 years. In countries such as Chad and Uganda, countries I'd like to stress are among the poorest and neediest. Due to the delayed agreement to accelerate, we have wasted a considerable amount of time. 8 years. 8 years in which maybe we would have been able to achieve these goals. The proposition stated that their progress has surpassed many borders initially intended, in reference to developing countries. But shouldn't these countries have been the focal point to begin with? As the opposition stated, success in already developed countries embellishing the data does not change the reality that is the world is suffering. These are about people, not numerals. Utilizing developing countries such as Guyana, who have recently ventured into a lucrative industry, natural gas, I dare say it's misleading. And undermines the developing countries that have nothing to rely on. Just the fact that we have the ability to debate human lives is a privilege. Optimism is not going to save them. While they may argue that we are being pessimistic, I'd like to say that we are operating as a megaphone for those who have no voice, for the hope they're implanting into helpless people. I thank you.
So we will move on to the rebuttal for the proposition, Mr. Cameron Gustave.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, Mr. Moderator, I stand here elated and honored to provide a 5-minute break from the incessant pessimism of our opposition. See, these arguments were handcrafted to make humanity seem like we are weak and incapable, like deers in the headlights, frozen by impending danger. And as a defendant and a believer in humanity, it is my duty to deconstruct their negative outlook and deliver the truth of what we as people are able to accomplish. You see, the first hole in their cobweb is their clear lack of understanding of the term acceleration. Now, we need not PhDs in physics to know that acceleration means to go faster and faster and faster. Not just going faster, but the rate at which we are going faster is going faster. And we can go faster. You see, the opposition then continues on and lies with their statistics. You see, India is, when you look at the spreadsheet, the 6th richest country in the world. When you look at raw GDP output, there are over 1 billion people in India. Of course, they have a large GDP. But when you look at the per capita basis, you see that, yes, it is very much still a low-income country. However, it is a BRICS country, which means that it has the potential to grow into something that it is bigger. The cities of India will become the most populous cities on the planet very soon. And with these development goals in mind, we could power these cities with renewable energy and strong institutions. Next, I want to go into this word that the opposition used, which greatly offended me. Frivolous? You are questioning the SGD's impact on an economy of a lower developing nation. You are saying that these goals should take by the wayside while we focus on whatever more topical issues. This is the topical issues. Because at the end of the day, what makes a country low income is the fact that we don't have these 17 things on the board. Okay? And the acceleration of the SGDs will accelerate the elevation of these nations out of their state. It's almost like, ladies and gentlemen, the opposition wants these poor countries to stay poor, to hold them around and say, look, you're not working, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. I believe in people and I believe in their power to elevate themselves. And these people, they question the goals themselves. Should these be things that desire our countries should desire? Who don't want peaceful and strong institutions? Who don't want access to clean water? Who tired of Wasco taking their water? These people think we are people without collaboration. They mentioned the COVID pandemic and how it was every man for itself. I don't recall that. I recall receiving millions of dollars in donations. I recall receiving vaccines. I recall the richer countries helping out the poor countries and spreading out the wealth, because we as people see people for people. It is the niceness of humanity that has brought us to where we are today, and it's the niceness of humanity that will bring us to our goal of accomplishing the nation and these sustainable development goals. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the needless and irrelevant anxiety of our opposition side and those who share their sentiment distract us from attaining our 2030 vision. Shyne was right. This is a ball game, and we need to play very well, and we can. I know that my team and I believe in humanity, and you should too. Thank you.
Now, at this time, we enter open discussion where we have members of the audience. If you'd like to make any comments or questions, you may do so. At this time, remember, it's not time to critique the content of the debaters' presentations, but you are able to ask them questions, maybe about their process in preparing and stuff like that. So do we have someone already? Okay. So yes, if you're interested in giving any comments or feedback, we will have a mic to pass around. Hold on, I think they have a mic they want to give around, so. Well, I have been told that Castries Comprehensive was informed that they had to prepare a debate, so they came ready to debate. But a presentation, so during this time, feel free to come up and give us at least a brief summary of your presentation. We don't want all that effort to go to waste.
Bonjour tout le monde. Moi c'est une jeune fille qui sortit en Castries Comprehensive Secondary School. Non, moi c'est Stivenia Jean-Baptiste. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges and fellow debating colleagues, I bid you all a pleasant good morning. I stand before you today to vehemently disagree with the notion that the immediate acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals is sufficient to meet the 2030 deadline. While the 17 SDGs are undoubtedly a vital framework for addressing global challenges, there are several compelling reasons why accelerating them immediately may not be the most effective path to success. the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals has been a global initiative since they were officially adopted by the various UN heads of state in 2015. These 17 goals were established to address a wide range of global issues, from poverty and inequality to environmental sustainability. The Sustainable Development Goals encompass a wide array of complex issues, from eradicating poverty to ensuring access to clean water and affordable energy. These are deeply entrenched issues, deeply rooted in social, economical, and political structures. The idea that we can simply accelerate these goals without a comprehensive understanding of the intricate challenges they pose is simply naive. Rushing the process may lead to half-baked solutions and unintended consequences between now, 2023, and 2030, 7 years later, is not adequate time to implement such changes. Additionally, accelerating the Sustainable Development Goals without due consideration could inadvertently exacerbate inequalities. The very essence of sustainable development is to leave no one behind, but an immediate push may disproportionately affect vulnerable and marginalized communities who lack the resources to adapt quickly. Unless countries who are less rich in resources receive aid from other countries in order to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs, then it would not be practical to expedite the process of implementing the SDG. We must take a careful, inclusive, and measured approach to ensure equitable progress. Furthermore, the urgency to accelerate the SDGs will lead to unsustainable practices and shortcuts, thereby compromising the long-term effectiveness of these goals. For instance, rapid industrialization to meet SDG targets for economic growth could have detrimental consequences for the environment and well-being in the future, as these plans will not be thoroughly executed due to the time constraints. One may, of course, disagree and say that the urgency of implementing these SDGs can help improve the quality of life for St. Lucians by reducing poverty and improving access to healthcare and education in line with SDG targets. However, if plans are not thoroughly implemented and executed in a timely manner to have a sustainable outcome, then it defeats the whole purpose of having the SDGs. The 2030 deadline is ambitious, but it is not arbitrary. It reflects a realistic acknowledgement of the complex, interconnected nature of global issues. We need to respect the deliberative process of policy development, which includes consultation, collaboration, and gradual implementation to achieve the most lasting and meaningful change. While the urgency to implement the SDGs can help improve the quality of life holistically, it must be executed in a timely manner to be of the most effect. In conclusion, while the urgency of the SDGs is undeniable, the complexity and the need for comprehensive, sustainable solutions require a measured approach. Ladies and gentlemen, I again reiterate that rushing to accelerate the goals may inadvertently undermine the very principles they aim to uphold. I would like to encourage collaborative efforts through the various stakeholders and employ the continuity of these goals as systems change. Moi ka encourager tout moun, à nous travailler ensemble, à nous travailler pour nous faire rêve nous en réalité. Let us focus on building a foundation of understanding, inclusivity, and long-term sustainability, rather than seeking immediate acceleration at the risk of a rushed and ineffective outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Unfortunately, we didn't have our judges here to give you some better remarks, but thank you for it. We had a hand raised for a contribution. Yes.
Okay, so this question is for the general group. Why did you focus on GDP statistics and not the GNP, which is the gross national product? Because to me, this is for both sides. Because if you're focusing on the gross national product, companies, businesses from outside, like let's say you have a St. Lucian company in Taiwan, they'd be bringing in some revenue and helping with the poverty too, right? So why did the both debaters decide that they were going to be focusing on GDP statistics for for the countries that were mentioned, rather than focusing on GNP statistics? Thank you.
Okay, which group is interested in, you can come up. I think you've left them stumped, so just give them a little. Feel free, you can come to the podium.
Okay. The general overview of what I was saying is that why did you focus on GDP statistics rather than GNP statistics? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, let's say you have a St. Lucian company that's existing in Taiwan, they're doing these things in Taiwan, and they're bringing money back to St. Lucia. To me, they'd be helping with the poverty as well. That was just my question.
Well, firstly, to be more so realistic with the setting and the context of the debate and the competition, because the judges aren't hearing it, measurements of GDP in comparison to GNP was simply, at least for me, more convenient for the basis of the point that we were making, just to discuss it as more of like a conversational piece, as opposed to looking at it from an economics point of view, where you are right. If we were to try and measure actual human development or the advancement of an actual economy in the various countries, especially given foreign investiture, it would be better or preferable to measure it with GNP or the Human Development Index. Both are like preferable in those situations, but in the context of the debate, when looking at where we wanted to have certain countries fall on the economic ranking, India in particular, as you heard the point in the rebuttal, it was simply more convenient in this instance to use GDP.
Does that answer the question effectively? Economic students, I hope you're taking notes. Yes. And we have...
What's the question?
And can you introduce yourself and then pose your question?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jenik Polius, and this question is for the leader of either side. I want to know how much prior were you all made aware of these debates and what was preparation like?
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your question. So we were made aware of this debate at the beginning of October. Now, I was initially supposed to be on the opposition, so we had Zoom meetings and research and everything for the opposition, and then suddenly someone who was supposed to be in our debate suddenly couldn't be there. So I had 6 days to do all of my research for this side of the proposition, and I think that in total I've gotten about 3 hours worth of sleep. Thank you.
Good morning. Please, is it still morning? It is not. Wait. Yes, it is. Okay, my bad. I don't keep very good track of time. Please excuse my sore throat. I promise I sound better normally. But as someone who debates also, it's always a big interest for me to know what influenced you to take the particular approach to the topic that you did, because there are always several ways, especially on the opposition side, that you could take the direction you go in to debate like a topic as expansive as this one. So I'm curious as to what was your influence for choosing this particular route. Not to say your route was not good, I'm just interested in why.
So yes, she's asking about your methodology. So why did you choose the approach, your delivery, your strategy?
No, I'm just, it's okay. So you're asking why did we choose our particular methodology, yeah? As in the particular way that we constructed this to get it presented. I'm just making sure, I'm just clarifying. The approach that we chose, our paper in particular, you guys can clarify after if you want to and if we have time. The approach that we chose initially was just to make mostly a literary argument first, where we didn't have the facts compiled, we didn't have the secondary data, we didn't have the auxiliary data, but we did have the arguments without any actual basis to them, no research, no sites, no support from the UN, no support from any research institute. We had like the literature there. We had the arguments just based off what do we think could be an argument. We had that written down. We had a few drafts of that. Then we realized it had absolutely no basis and no credits. So not quickly, it took a while, but in a very short notice, we then went, okay, firstly, we'll source from the UN, naturally. They'll have the most direct basis for the topic in particular. Then we needed some economic data, so we went for general research in the economic state of, firstly we needed the lists, the GDP question from earlier, we got those compiled, we picked our examples. Then we looked for quotes. It was harder, but it wasn't hard, to be honest. After that, we just had to compile them based on the literature we already had, just insert them where we could, put the quotes where relevant, add the economic data, make it sound, really, really tough when you say it. And yeah, that's it for us. You satisfied, miss? You good?
Do we have any comments from the proposition in terms of methodology?
Okay, so based on the methodology that we use, basically the leader used 3 points and I as a seconder, I focused on one main point and I worked with my biology teacher actually because she's into sustainable development and she helped me to put the points together. So basically in terms of the methodology, all I did was I basically reaffirmed the moot and then I explained, well my point was on the decade of action, so I explained that. And then I gave the points that that the UN countries use in the 2019 resolution, and then I expanded on them. Then I focused on the goals that there was progress made, and that was about it for mine. Yeah.
Yes, so we have another.
So I have a question for Shyne.
Could you just introduce yourself, please?
Oh, sorry. My name is Trinity Isaac, and I am from the Cassius Comprehensive Secondary School. I'm also a theater student, and I want to ask Shyne a question. So, though I noticed the way you you presented yourself was very unique, very, I don't know, it's yes. It was very unique, and I want to ask, is the fact that you are part of the creative arts industry, has it contributed to the way you present yourself when it comes to debating?
Thank you. Hi, Trinity. I love that question. And the answer is actually yes. So we have all three of these students at Cape Humanities, and then we have pure science, and then I'm here doing theater, which makes me feel a little bit left out. But the thing about theater, even though I'm more of a backstage person, growing up and loving that kind of thing makes me so much more comfortable being in front of an audience. Theater requires you to have a lot of vulnerability in front of people, to make that connection with people. So when I was working through my speech, I didn't see it as these are statistics and I need to lay them out and this is a debate. I saw this as this is my audience and I need to get them on the same page as I am. I need to connect with them. And I don't like having the script, well, not the script, but my paper in front of me and reading from it. Just like actors need to memorize our lines and be able to deliver them authentically, I try to do that as much as possible. I commit it to memory, and then what comes out is straight from the heart. Thank you.
Do we have any? Yes. Our last comment.
So it's me again, right? I'm not sure what your name is, but the rebuttal person on the preposition side, I like the approach you use, how you try to relate to us about Wasco not giving us the water, and that really captured the audience's attention, and we were listening, and it was entertaining, and I like that.
And just for clarification, it is proposition, not preposition. So right now we are just waiting for our judges to return. Oh, we have one more. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ethan Octave from the Barbados Secondary School. For the proposition, my question to you is whether you took into consideration that manufacturers, when it comes to labor, it helps in providing, let's say, revenue or money for the poor people. And I was just thinking of the SDGs and saying, like, how is it that when we think of the manufacturers and the corporate businesses, we have a problem with pollution, but at the same time we have a problem with poverty. And when you take out the manufacturers or the corporate businesses, then we have more poverty. But at the same time, when you do the poverty, we cannot like provide our basic needs or things that we need. So let's just say for the businesses that build the bottles and those things, the plastic waste and those stuff, we have to deal with the pollution that it causes. But at the same time, we have to deal with the people who's not getting jobs, and it provides jobs for the people who are poor. And then you have to look at the justice system, the labor law. Now, it says that people have to work a certain amount of time and get paid a certain amount. But then, we're not seeing that in some corporate businesses and factories. People are not getting paid properly, and they're not working the required hours. They go over it. Then we look at the education system in St. Lucia. Let's just say in St. Lucia, because when we think of the SDGs, mostly think of the outside, the bigger countries. Why don't we look at the smaller countries like St. Lucia? Sorry. All I just wanted to say was, I think that we should, like, the SDGs should be looked at a whole basis. We cannot solve one problem and not expect it to affect another problem. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Okay, so we have to give the judges a bit more time. Yes.
Morning, everybody. Bonjour, tout le monde. My name is Lucan Francis. Just a general question to anyone who wants to answer. First of all, guys, kudos. You all did a fantastic job. So, one of applause again. All right. So often the SDGs comes across as somewhat existential. However, when you begin to break it down, break the goals down, you begin to appreciate how the targets and the related indicators are applicable and relevant even on individual level. I see you guys as the brightest of our next generation. So the question I have, you are the best people to answer it. When we're dealing with our education system and we want to find a way to create more awareness within our secondary schools for the SDGs, what do you suggest? How can it be more effective in terms of the aims and the ambitions, not just in terms of the academic curricula, but also in terms of the extracurricular activities? What suggestions do you have? Thanks.
Yes. Oh.
Who's going?
Dasha. Yeah.
So in terms of creating awareness, several things can be done. To begin with, in incorporating it in the curriculum and actually teaching students about it in a very real sense. Also, in secondary schools, they have assemblies. You can have speakers coming to speak and introduce ideas to cultivate an awareness about sustainable development goals with the students. Faith, do you have anything?
I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I learn through action, and I feel like the best way to raise awareness of the goals is by implementing it in our schools every day. I feel like here we tend to focus on the individual goals surrounding the times in which they're popular, the holidays designated to them, or the times in which more people are focused on them. But I feel like a good way for us to really drill it into our students and really get it into their day-to-day lives is by acting it out, acting through it, having activities, changing some of the protocols the schools already have, making a bigger effort to reduce plastic waste. That would be one of the best ways from at least infant school to already plant that seed of awareness into them, plant that mode of action into them that we will reap the fruits of when they grow up.
For raising awareness in the schools, and I believe at various school levels, primary, secondary, and even tertiary, to Arthur Lewis Community College I'll represent, I don't believe that it should be all 17 consistently hammered into every layer of the curriculum at every level. I don't believe that personally, that every level should have it hammered in there. But I do believe that based on certain subjects at certain levels, because at the primary level, I wouldn't believe through grades K through 6 that hammering or trying to hammering through those 7 years, all 17 points would really, it could set the basis or the foundation for like children, but I don't believe that underneath that curriculum, the primary level, that all of them would be integrated properly. Now I understand in the primary level, they have certain subjects, general science, social studies, just the smaller subjects where you can integrate at a lower level certain SDGs at that point, where you integrate in those sciences, those social sciences, the point of no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being. But I believe that it should be diversified and specified when you go up. Where in secondary schools, if students are doing business, economics, principles of accounts, principle of business, then you go into more specific ones, industry, innovation, infrastructure. You can give a nod to it, but not dedicate particular time associated to it. Just give them the understanding that it exists, the importance of it, not a dedicated class, but it's enough to give them incentive to research it themselves and be interested and understand the depth and importance of it. And when you get to levels such as tertiary levels, where there are the nursing departments and humanities, theatre, where you can have more specified allocations where the nurses would have to understand good health and well-being, then as you go up with the basis in primary school that's established, where you just give a nod to it. In secondary school, the specialization, when you get into the business subjects, when you have languages that show off the culture, and then in each particular tier where you have your business subjects talking about the more business allocated ones, agricultural students listening about climate action, life below water, life on land. Then when you get to the tertiary level, you can have dedicated courses with work in that if you've set the basis for that. That's my belief, personally. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the school feeding program is already an action at the primary level towards zero hunger, okay?
Yes. Well, did we have anyone from the proposition that wanted to answer?
Thank you very much. I would like to say that I remember that my first interaction with the SDGs was actually during the pandemic. I had seen that there was a workshop online that was working towards them. But what really got me interested in them was the fact that they put us teenagers in the position of government officials and politicians. It wasn't just, okay, let's read about what these other people have done and these are the facts and these are the statistics, but it was imagine yourself if you were put in charge of enacting change, if you were the one who had to decide, okay, how will you allocate this budget? All right, then what are the relations between these countries? It gets you to think about it in a way that, okay, maybe I actually can do something. Maybe I'm not just an observer, but it is very possible for me to see myself right now doing something that actually changes things beyond just volunteerism or doing something at school, but telling these children that right now you may not be in a position where you have all of the authority, but you can build on that. And by the time that you become an adult, like I am now, I'm seeing, all right, this is definitely something that I want to work on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I was just echoing what Ms. said earlier, that while schools may not go around stating and advertising the SDGs, but we have been smartly doing good, which of course include almost every single one of the 17 SDGs. And Ms. cited one. If you know, at most schools, if not every single school in St. Lucia, we address poverty. So there might not be an official school feeding program at the secondary level, but we do not ignore the fact that students are hungry, and we ensure that we develop programs to assist. That's just one example. We have various clubs and groups that are supported through the school's mission, vision, and the entire school's culture, building partnerships with external agencies that would promote aspects of the SDGs. And as I said earlier, we've actually redefined the SDGs, simply doing good. And so we have the Interact Club, where they've empowered the students to do almost everything there. The students have fed the hungry. They have been empowered to be sustainable in all of their engagements. And so you've seen the SDGs actualized in the daily living of the various partners within the society, within the schools, within the churches, within the communities. So I believe that we have both the induction or the deduction process, but certainly I think that SDGs are actualized in our various communities, various sectors of our country. I just wanted to see this.
Miss, I thought you would have comment on quality education. That would be the number one.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So we're still waiting on our judge.
May we also include the within schools? So we have responsible consumption and production, where within the school system we promote healthy eating. So I think CCSS was one of the first schools where soft drinks were banned, and then we have the Ministry of Education making it a policy statement. Additionally, we had, for one of our anniversaries, through the partnership with the Canadian High Commissioner's Office, we were able to introduce a green space. We had our garden where we actually cultivated produce that the students planted in partnerships with the High Commissioner, Marie Legault, who funded some parts of that program. And then we had the Japanese come in to show the students about composting. So there was responsible consumption and production of various goods and services at our school. So we could probably sit here and see all of the various aspects of the SDGs being actualized within the education sector. I just wanted to add this.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't going to comment. I do agree that there are things done in St. Lucia, especially the education system. Everything you just mentioned is correct, but I think the mindset of here is everything we're already doing is one of the reasons the nation gets held back. It is important to recognize the steps we make, but also important to visualize the steps we can continue to make. The question the gentleman over there asked, yes, this is what we are doing, but also I think it's an important conversation to have that. What else can we do? I mean, we're doing these things, but at the same time, these are things we already know. When you think of things done with the SDGs, the feeding programs, all these things might come to mind, but I don't think it's about what comes to mind. We have to think about what more, how much bigger we can do, how many more steps we can take. For this to be a question that was asked when we already have so many things, shows that maybe not enough is being done or being conceptualized. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, yes, fair points. And I do believe that just as there are stuff being done, at times there isn't much communication related to it being done. So oftentimes we have these various programs happening, all these great works, but no concerted or coordinated effort is made to connect them to say, we're doing this because of the SDGs, or we're doing this in line with this specific goal. So even from some of the suggestions made by our debaters, I think we have some professors, some teachers, lecturers in here. It's important that even in your own teaching, how do you integrate the SDGs in your courses? When you have your curriculums and you give them out, you have your learning outcomes, but do you also point out which goals are immediately impacted by what the students are learning? So that effort of connecting all the dots, I think, is the next critical step, especially in our SDG goals and promoting them. Because it's one thing, we mention all of these things kind of in passing at times, but you can only tell how truly revolutionary or truly active a campaign is when it's the regular talk of the town. When you can bring it up to the average person and they can tell you, yeah, I know what that is. I learned about that in school. Or my professor showed us that in class. Here's where my program applies to these things. So again, program activities such as this, the debating competition, but other activities that the United Nations Office has done need to be shown. We need to see the whole picture. Therefore, yes, so see that whole picture so the average person can simply look at everything and see, okay, I understand the picture. I understand where you're going and I understand how to play it. Yes, as our debater said, faster, faster, and more faster. So Debaters, I think you really gave our judges a headache because we've only had one back so far. But yes, in the meantime, just to go over the criteria for the prepared presentation, the judges will be judging on soundness of points, logical development, audibility and clarity, posture and personality, command of the material. And for the best speaker, it will be judged based on oh yes, we have Ms. Jacobs who would like to say something. Do we have the mic anywhere, the portable mic? Yeah, you can come up front. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the whole idea of having a debate. This is all in keeping with the whole idea of sustainable development because it is about engagement, it's about discussion, it's about research, okay? And I want to encourage the schools that are here, the Comprehensive School, Barbados, SJC, St. Mary's. You guys will be coming to Sir Arthur very soon, okay? And I want to encourage you to get involved in the clubs at the college. Get involved, in particular, the Debate Society, okay? The Debate Society is very important. You would be surprised at how much it prepares you, you know, all the aspects of your life that it helps you to hone particular skills that you need, okay, in the workplace. Also, just in dealing with issues, having the mind not just to complain about things, but to engage in confrontation that is more or less respectful and polite rather than fighting. When we look at what's happening in our society, the state of escalating crime involving the youth and violence involving the youth, the debating encourages you to deal with problems, deal with concerns, questions that you have about things going on around you in the society, you understand, and particular problem areas by engaging in confrontation that is respectful. So you see, the two debating sides, they engage in confrontation, but they're not fighting with each other. You understand, they are not exchanging bullets. So I just want to encourage you guys. I know when you get to Sir Arthur, there'll be lots of clubs competing for you to join them because we have lots of clubs at the college. But please give some consideration to the Debate Society. So I'm looking forward to when you guys come up to Sir Arthur in the next few years, that some of you will join the society. Okay? All right. Yep. Thank you.
We have one more.
I just have one question. So what about the students who don't want to do classes like the hands-on, like the agriculture? They like to go and do hands-on. What do we have for them? Because the youth on the street, it's not that they don't want to learn or they don't have the capabilities of learning. It's what they want to do. Some of them want to be engineers. Some of them want to go on, touch an engine, fix up an engine, plant vegetables, feed fowls, They want to have hands-on activities instead of sitting down in a class and doing maths and English. So I just want to ask, what does the SDG have for that as well?
Could we get someone from the United Nations group to give us an informed response to that?
Okay.
My name is Chad Hunt, and I am from the Department of Sustainable Development. Without food, no one else survives. So within that, you look at reduction in poverty, and there's health. It's one of the goals in terms of health. So that's where food comes in. So you have to think of agriculture within that realm. Did that answer your question? No, it doesn't only deal with education. Okay, no, I'm not saying it doesn't only deal with education. It's all these things don't necessarily have to you focus on education, because if you look at, again, the health is food. Food is one of the most important things in your health. So if a society with food, in terms of agriculture, again, is very important, then the society will be successful. So you focus on it's like it's a class, but hold on. Yeah, you focus on everything like it's a class, but it's not. It's what is necessary for the success of a society. And again, agriculture is very important. It's one of the most important things in any society.
Yes, so we have.
Right. Okay. So Randolph Fugel, I think what I'm going to say based on that question is, if you look at SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals, you look at partnering with various organizations, maybe like NSDC, who does hands-on training. You look at SSDF, who provides certain courses in different areas for young people. If you look at these things, and I guess probably that could answer your question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I am from the Small Grants Program of the UN. And I think what you're asking is, what is there for the simple man who doesn't want to go to school, is not academically inclined? So with our Small Grants Program, we target the communities, community level, community organizations, the youth. We are strong on building capacity. So a lot of our projects fund what you're asking about. It gives people opportunities where they could learn skills. We fund even the disabled. We have a very high-tech project now in Vieux-Fort for the disabled that will train them to generate income through agriculture. They have access, the facility is designed for access, whether you're on a wheelchair, whether you have one leg, the blind. We cater for everybody. So if you don't want to go to school, what you need to do, build partnerships, join organizations that will give you the opportunities that you cannot access on your own. Okay, does that help?
Another question for anyone else who wants to answer. So the UN has the SDG. They look for the poor. They try to limit the struggles on earth, right? So I have just one question. We have the war that's happening with Palestine and, well, Hamas and Israel, right? So why is it that the UN has done all this? They have power to place sanctions, especially the US. They have power to place sanctions, right? So why is it that they haven't placed sanctions on Israel, but they have placed sanctions on St. Lucia they have placed the ley law on us, stopping the US from giving us any support or training for our police officers, when you have Israeli just going and bombing hospitals and these different places? Why is it that the UN has not placed sanctions to stop them? And then, I don't know if that's true, but it's a speculation. I don't know if it's true. But then you have the US helping Israel and also funding or giving money to Palestine. So where do they stand? That's my question.
Let us just quickly answer the question. Yeah.
I didn't hear the question.
No.
I can.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, well, to that question, we ask that one of the UN office members speak to you privately on that, as we have our judges back. And we would like to invite one of the judges to come and give some general remarks as well as the results.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience. We had a tough job judging both teams. Before I give the final results, what I would like to say is just a little feedback from our discussions. First of all, well done to both of you, or both teams. You did a very good job. It was a tough decision. We liked the way that you presented. We felt that there was a lot of research done. Your arguments were backed with reliable sources, so that was very good. One of the things that when you are preparing for the debate, one of the things to keep in mind is more eye contact. That is always the toughest thing, especially when you have sources. You may not know the sources by heart, and you want to refer to your information sheet, but it just takes a lot of practice so that it comes across a bit more natural. Okay? So, without any further ado, the proposition had 610 marks, and the opposition had 605. So the winning team is the proposition, but it was, like I said, that's why we were in there for a long time. It was very close. So well done to both of you. Strong arguments on both sides. Okay, and now for best speaker, drum roll. Best speaker is from the proposition team, Miss Shyne Savory. I'm sure your alma mater will be very proud, Shyne.
Yes, could we get the winning team to come and receive their award? Yeah, so while the second team is getting their pictures, we'll also invite Mr. Chad Hunt, Sustainable and Environment Officer of the Department of Sustainable Development, to give the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to, on behalf of the UN, Barbados, and Eastern Caribbean Office, the Safa Lewis Community College, and the Department of Sustainable Development, I would like to thank the audience, the participants, the organizers for coming here today. I believe that the conversations that were brought up, the arguments that were brought up, were vital for us to be aware, for those who are not, to be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, and for us to try to work to that goal, that 2030 goal. Again, I would like to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to be very short because based on the time. I'd like to thank everyone for making the effort to come here today, and for all the secondary school students to have an idea of what the Sustainable Development Goals are, and also for them to have an avenue in the debate society, Safa Lewis Community College Debate Society, and know that it doesn't include a type. As we could see, the participants were from different disciplines, and this is something that they could do in the future, and to spread awareness of everything going forward. Thank you. Sorry, one more thank you. I find the UN. Yes, we have refreshments. So before you leave, exit and go to your right, and you'll get refreshments. But again, special thanks to Dr. Nicholas, and Miss Jacobs. Without the two of them, this wouldn't be possible today.
Again, thanks you to everyone who came out, and now enjoy some refreshments.